HarperCollins presents The Bonbon Girl by Linda Finlay, read by Charlie Sanderson. Prologue. Colenso watched as the rising tide advanced towards the Devil's Frying Pan. The turbulence created by rough seas surging through its entrance was legendary. Her father had chosen his spot well. Desperately, she tugged at the ropes binding her hands, only to wince as the damp hemp tightened, cutting deeper into her flesh. As white-tipped waves swirled ever closer to her feet, she shuddered. In the distance, she could hear the sounds of the organ from the travelling fair. Loud and brash, its purpose was to attract the crowds, and judging from the shrieks of laughter coming from the villagers on the green, it was doing its job. Nobody would hear her screams, and Kitto, dear unsuspecting Kitto, would be waiting for her. The light was fading, the wind rising, bringing with it a thick bank of rolling mist. She licked her salt-coated lips, the crescendo from the waves pounding the tidal cave and reverberating around the Serpentine rock was deafening now, blotting out all sound of the fair. Her father had promised to return for her decision before the tide was in full spate, but, intent on his mission and wishing her scared witless, she knew he was deliberately cutting it fine. He'd have a wasted journey, though, for she had no intention of changing her mind. Her heart belonged to Kitto, and without him, her life would serve no purpose. She would take her love to the grave if need be. And if it was deemed to be a watery one, then so be it. Spray from the advancing swell covered her feet before receding to allow her respite, albeit momentarily, and she gave a laugh that came out as a high-pitched shriek. How ironic that her name, Colenso, should mean, from the dark pool. For now it looked as if she would be returning to it much sooner than she'd thought. Chapter 1. Cadgwith, the lizard, Cornwall. And it harm none, do what thou will. Wiccan read. With these words ringing in her ear, Colenso put the bread to bake, then set about making the pastry for her pasties. Today was a special day, and she had a plan. Excitement bubbled up as she mixed swede, potato, and onion with the scraps of meat old Buller the butcher had given her in exchange for helping him earlier that morning. Don't forget the herbs, Colenso. Marjoram for love, rosemary to stimulate the heart, sage for wishes, and best put in a pinch of parsley for lust. Really, Mam Wen, Colenso chided, colour flooding her cheeks. Her grandmother believed her beloved herbs were the answer to everything, nurturing varieties that by rights shouldn't even grow, let alone flourish on this wild peninsula. Then she remembered, and looked up with a start. Sure enough, the room was empty, for her beloved Mam Win had passed on at Saum last October. Being the festival that marked both the end and beginning of their year, and a time of celebration for those who'd gone before, Mam Win would have thought it perfect timing. But Colenso had loved her grandmother dearly, and still felt her loss keenly. "Oh, Mam Wen, I do miss you so," she murmured, dashing a tear from her eye. "The weather's been bitterly cold this winter, and many of your plants are lying dormant, so I'll have to use the ones I've dried." And as she reached up to take a handful from the clothes pulley above her head, she felt the slightest of touches on her shoulder, and knew her grandmother approved. Crumbling them into the mixture, she finished making the pasties, adding a decorative finish to the biggest with a flourish. She hoped Kitto, her beloved, would appreciate it. As the aroma of baked dough filled the air, she removed the loaves to cool, added the pasties to the tin, and slid it back into the hot recess of the Cornish stove that was her mam's pride and joy. It had been her father's wedding present to her, and about the only thing he'd ever bought her, she thought, staring around the room with its hand-me-down dresser and rickety table and chairs. The tiny window let in very little light, even on the brightest day, and there wasn't enough space to swing a rat. Imagine the luxury of living somewhere with room to put her things. Not that she had many. Colenso sighed, A
Sample complete. Ready to continue?